Okay, so we're going to do a couple of these first. Can I get a hand for what do I do when I take x to the 7th divided by x to the 5th? Yeah, so I'm going to write it out, and let's see how. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So these cancel. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pairs, and we're left with 2 of them, so it gives us x squared. So if we subtract, as both Ira and Shireen said, 7 minus 5 would give us a 2. So that's much faster, isn't it? So we can do that. We can subtract exponents when we're dividing. As long as those variables are the same, we can subtract. So what if it's x to the 3rd over x to the 4th? What happens when we subtract? It becomes x to the -1. Okay, pay attention here. What is x to the -1 equal to? It's not a square root. I know last period they said the same thing. Okay, so I'm gonna multiply it out. I'm gonna put 3 x's on the top and 4 on the bottom. So 1, 2, 3 pairs cancel. What is left on the top? 1, because whenever we're canceling those out, those are all 1s. So this becomes 1 over x. So this x to the -1 is equal to 1 over x. It's like 1 over x to the 1. So we essentially, when we have that negative exponent, we take it, bring it down to the bottom, and make it positive. So you did see that in Algebra 1. I knew it always happens. Students need a review of that, so that's why we're talking about it again today. So what if it's x to the 2 over x to the 7th? When we subtract those, it would become x to the -5. So a hand, please, to what that would be with positive exponents, because we always want our exponents to be positive. Hayden knows. Anybody else? Emma, take a guess. Emma P. But look what we did on this one. This x to the -1. 1 over x to the 5th. That's right. So it just goes down to the bottom, x to the 5th, and becomes the positive. Okay, so we had a negative exponent here and a negative exponent here. Did it make my answer negative? No. So a negative exponent does not make the expression negative. It's a very common mistake that students want to make the answer negative, and it's not. It has to do with where the placement of that number. Okay, so what about x to the 3rd over x to the 3rd? If we subtract here, we get x to the 0. What's x to the 0 equal to? It's 1. Okay, let me show you why, in case you didn't think about that. So we have 1 pair, 2 pair, 3 pairs, and when we're crossing them out, 1s are left. So it's just equal to 1. Same thing on the top, same thing on the bottom. So it's equal to 1. Okay? So anything with an exponent 0 is going to be equal to what number? 1. Okay, so let's do some examples. So what do we do first on number 4? We're going to multiply, right? And when we multiply, what do we do with those exponents? Add them. So this becomes x to the -8. and then take 4 times -2, which is -8. So now we want to make sure that our answers have only positive exponents, so we need to simplify that. So this becomes, what does this become? So this -8, does that -8 exponent apply to this number in the front? No, it's not next to it. It's not, it would have to have parentheses around it if we were talking about that. So this only applies to this here. So what goes down on the bottom? X to the 8. And then the -8 stays up on the top. So throughout the day, I've heard students say, but that's a -8. Don't I move it to the bottom? What's happening there? Why don't we move it to the bottom? It's negative, but it's not a exponent. It's just a number. Okay, so a negative number doesn't just move down to the bottom. It's only that negative exponent that moves down to the bottom. Okay, so let's simplify this one. Go ahead and do that for us, Omar. What would this become when we simplify this? We add those exponents or multiply them? That's right. So we have m to the -4, n to the n to the 1. That's right. And so then we want to write this with positive exponents. So what goes down to the bottom? M to the 4th, and then the 5n stays up on the top. Does that make sense? Okay, so on number 6, we have an exponent to an exponent. So what do we do when we're taking an exponent to an exponent? When we're multiplying, we add exponents, but when we're taking an exponent to an exponent, what do we do with those exponents? Multiply them. So easy to forget. Don't forget the 2 to the -3. So 2 to the -3, and then this would be -4 times -3, which is 12. And then 4 times -3, which is -12. And now we want to bring our x's and our y's together. So Emma W., what would we get when we bring our x's and y's together? So we have an x to the 12th and x to the -4. So what is, yep, x to the 8th and y to the, that's right. Okay, so now we're going to take our negative exponents and now move them to the bottom. So on the, what's the only one that stays on the top is the x to the 8th, right? Because that's the only one that has a positive exponent. So y to the 11th goes down on the bottom. And then this 2 to the -3, what is 2 to the 3 equal to? 2 times 2 times 2, 8. So the 8 then goes down on the bottom. That makes sense? Yeah. It's not, because remember, the negative exponent doesn't make the number negative. It just moves it down to the bottom. So it's like a 2 to the 3rd down on the bottom, which is 8. Okay. Okay, and number 7. Leah, can you do that for us? Were you here yesterday? Oh, okay. So, Raphael, you were taking your test though. So do you know what to do? Do you know what to do with exponents? Yes, very good. Yes. So we're going to take 2 squared, and then this would be x to the -2. Good. And y to the good. So lastly, now we want to get rid of those negative exponents. So how would we rewrite it? Kira, do you know how to write it? On the top or the bottom? So because, on the bottom. Good. Okay, so I think the U try is a little bit too hard. I'm going to change it and give you a simpler one. Okay, so I changed the U try. Go ahead and do that instead. And rewrite, make sure you write your answer with positive exponents. So if you added a -5 plus 1, what would you get?
-5 plus 1.
Uh-huh.
6.
-5.
Oh, 4, 4, 4.
4, yeah. So many numbers. Yep, good. Yes, and write it all as 1. Just write it as a fraction.
What do you mean the negative?
Yes, good job. And sorry, pause. A -15.
Oh, negative.
Yeah.
15?
Yep. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
See what you got? So I like the x to the 5th. I like the y to the 4th. This -15 stays on the top because it's not an exponent, the negative. Does that make sense?
If it stays as negative 15.
It stays -15, yeah. It's only if it's a negative exponent does it move down there. Yeah. Great. Okay. And then you need to finish your test. Okay. Okay. Perfect. Great. Great.
Oh, sorry.
Did you do it? I like the x to the 5th. I like the y to the 4th. This is not an exponent, so it stays up on the top, -15. It's only if it's a negative exponent do we move it down to the bottom.
Okay.
It's a negative number, not a negative. Just a second. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. The one you
Is this right?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. Oh, except y4.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Oh. What? We call it.
Oh, yeah, because
Okay, the answer is going to be negative 15x to the 5th over y to the 4th. Questions on that? So this negative 15 is not an exponent. It's only when it's a negative exponent that we move it down. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm going to make an adjustment on the last two. I'm going to change this. Okay, so we're going to do two more. And I changed number 9. So if you could rewrite the new one down, I'm going to change number 10 too. Show it to me before you go. So number 9. What do we do with the 3 and the 12? Okay, but when we write it, how do we write it if we divide it? Where does the 4 go? So when we have that 3 and that 12, we have to cancel, don't we? What goes into both 3 and 12? 3. It's okay. 3 goes 3 goes into 3 once. 3 goes into 12 4 times. Okay. There you go. Sure. So then what do we do with the exponents when we're dividing? Subtract. So we get u to the 4 minus 2 would be subtract. So it would be u to the 2nd. And then v to the 1 minus 5, negative 4. And so then the 4 goes down on the bottom. It stays down there. And then how do we rewrite this with positive exponents? U squared over 4v4. Questions on that? I just took that negative exponent, brought it down to the bottom, and made it positive. That's all we did. Do you have a question, Alina? You look confused. Are you sure? Because if you do, somebody else might as well. Okay, on number 10, what do we do with the 6 and the 2? Yeah, 6 divided by 2 is going to be 3. And then when we divide, what do we do with our exponents? Subtract. So 1 minus 5 would be negative 4. And then 2 minus 3, negative 1. So then how would we write that answer? So the 3 stays on the top because it doesn't have any negative exponents. And then m to the 4th goes down to the bottom, and n. You could put a 1 there, but we don't have to. Okay, that's it.